Well, good morning. Welcome to the Birmingham Bluefield Chamber's Real Estate Forecast. I'm Joe Bauman. I'm the president of the Birmingham Bluefield Chamber, and on behalf of the staff and our ambassadors, board of directors, I want to welcome you to the beautiful Townsend Hotel on what may be the actually first day of winter. So hopefully you enjoyed the brisk walk from the parking lot. Before we get started, I do have some introductions and some thank yous to make. Starting off with, I do want to introduce the rest of the chamber team. Cheryl Geralds is our operations manager. Cheryl, say hi. Kelly Bennett is our events and marketing manager. Kelly. Samantha Michalak is our membership engagement manager. And Ashley Averill is our intern. Ashley's looking for work. She'll be graduating from Oakland University this year, so she's great, and she's been a wonderful addition to our staff. So if you're looking for someone, talk to Ashley. So for those of you who might be new to the chamber, we are about 700 members strong, and we try to exceed all of your expectations with a staff of 4 who I just introduced. We couldn't do what we do without a group of dedicated volunteers, primarily being those of our ambassadors and our board of directors. These people give their time, their talent, and their treasure to forward the mission and the vision of the chamber to help strengthen the overall business climate in the communities that we serve. So if you currently are serving as an ambassador or a board member, please stand and be recognized. Thank you. I also want to give special recognition this morning to our sponsors who are sponsoring this breakfast. Please keep in mind that it's through this corporate support that we receive that we can put on programs like the Forecast Series and do it in a way that's affordable for our guests. So our sponsors for this morning, our diamond sponsor is Clark Hill LLC. Our platinum sponsors are the Bank of Ann Arbor. Our gold sponsors are Fenner, Mellstrom and Dooling and Mercantile Bank. Our silver sponsors, the Birmingham Shopping District. And our bronze sponsors are Comcast Business and United Shore. So please join me in thanking our sponsors this morning. And finally, I want to recognize a special group of our sponsors, our corporate supporters, and those are our legacy sponsors. These are chamber members who agree to invest a certain amount every year to support the programming that we do for all of our members so that we can offer much of our programming either at low cost or no cost for some of our smaller members. So our networking events, our professional development events, all are done at no cost because of the support of our legacy sponsors. And I want to acknowledge our legacy sponsors for 2020. They include Clark Hill, Bank of Ann Arbor, Chief Financial Credit Union, Comcast, Birmingham Bluefield Credit Union, North America Midway, and United Shore. So thank you to our legacy sponsors. Now I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator for this morning, Kevin Washburn. Kevin is an experienced real estate and corporate transactional attorney with Clark Hill who focuses his practice on continually surpassing client expectations. As a senior attorney in Clark Hill's Detroit office, his real estate practice involves representations of buyers, sellers, developers, investors, and lenders in a variety of sophisticated transactions. He has served as lead counsel on multiple acquisitions, dispositions, and rehab restoration and development projects in downtown Detroit, throughout Michigan, and in other areas across the country. Additionally, he has significant commercial leasing experience in settings ranging from standalone single-tenant buildings to shopping malls and mixed-use properties. Before Kevin comes up, I do want to mention that you should all have blue index cards on your tables. While you're hearing our presentations, if you have a question for either one of our panelists, we'll have an opportunity to do a little Q&A at the end. So at this time, I'd like to have Kevin Washburn join us and kick off our real estate forecast.
Good morning. Thank you for the intro. That was nice. And thank you for letting me be a part of this discussion. It's kind of exciting. I did a quick little Google search this morning and just put in Michigan real estate forecast. And West Michigan looks glum, but yet then the very next one down, West Michigan looks awesome. The Detroit area looks glum, then the very next one, Detroit area looks awesome. So curious to see what our experts have to say about that and what your questions are. So our first speaker today is Scotty Lee, who serves as the Vice President, Strategy and Analytics for Taubman. His role at Taubman, Mr. Lee is responsible for the corporate strategy, research, financial planning and analysis, and financial analytics functions for the company. He's a member of the company's core leadership team, asset management, and he joined Taubman in 2007. Mr. Lee is a member of the International Council for Shopping Centers, including its North American Research Group and its Planning Committee Chairman for the 2020 Research Connections Conference. He is also an active member of the Urban Land Institute. He holds an MBA with high distinction from the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business and a BS in Industrial Engineering and Management Sciences and Economics from Northwestern University. At this time, I'd like to introduce and welcome Scotty Lee to the podium.
So hopefully I can walk around a little. I don't do a very good job of standing still. Thank you for having me this morning on this nice cold Michigan morning, right? So Joe wanted to talk to you a little bit about the mall business. So I work at Taubman. We're up the road here in Bloomfield Hills, own 25 shopping centers, 21 in the United States, 4 over in Asia. We have offices in Hong Kong, Korea, and in China. I'm going to spend a little bit of time just kind of telling us where we are and where we think we're going to go, particularly a little bit in redevelopment, give you a couple of examples. They're a little bit out of market, but to give you good analogs as to what we might be seeing here locally over time. So just kind of a little bit of where we are today. You guys have probably all heard about this retail apocalypse, right? So in 2017, this phrase was coined by The Atlantic in this great article, and has taken on such of fervor that it now actually has its own Wikipedia page, which is interesting. But if you actually listen to the media, the mall actually died 3 years ago, or actually now 6 years ago, but 3 years before the so-called beginning of the retail apocalypse. My favorite part about this page here is that if you look at the bottom 3, those are actually British media outlets, so I guess they didn't have much to write about before Brexit and Megxit. So not sure how much they're talking about the U.S. Mall industry now. But you know, the death of the mall has been called for years and years and years and years, as you probably know the Mark Twain quote up top. You know, the reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. So going back to 1998, we were all going to buy everything on Yahoo. Jerry Yang was going to put us out of business. But even before the internet, when we're still talking on landlines and barely had cable TV in 1990, there has been the call the death of the mall. So the mall industry certainly had 9, 10, 11 lives, and you know, going forward, you know, we expect that the industry will continue to thrive. So you know, that's a little of the media narrative. I'd like to hopefully enlighten or at least illustrate or illuminate a little bit of where I think the actual reality is, right? I think Kevin told me that he majored in philosophy, so he'll know the quote up top. You know, the only constant in life is change, right? And retail specifically, retail may be the most Darwinian of all industries. I certainly like to think so. The bar graph that I have here, I actually presented to our board 3 years ago, and is really just to illustrate how you know, there's this constant change within the retail and the retail real estate industry. If you go back to the beginning of this millennium, right, in 2001, if you look locally here in Metro Detroit, there are 25 regional malls, or what we call fashion department stores. And really, in this case, it's Jacobson's for those of you guys who've been here or grew up locally, right? If you fast forward 15 years, right, that number went from 15 really down to 25 because there were about 10 closures, right? And then it was offset by 3 openings. So you went from 25 to 18 in that 15-year period. And that was, and the reason why we picked 2016, and that was before the so-called retail apocalypse, right? So from 2016 to 2018, when I did this presentation originally, you had a couple of more closures. You had Eastland on the Eastland and Harper Woods, Monroe kind of downriver or between here and Toledo. And today we're still around at 18. So why does this happen, right? The biggest thing tends to be is a shift in demographics, right? There's just kind of shifts in the market. In addition to demographics, you may have a better mousetrap, as we say in the industry. Essentially, new competitive supply. A new mall nearby gets built, right? And just to highlight maybe here locally what that may be is Eastland is a great example in terms of shifts in demographics. When the Hudson Company or Hudson Department Store opened that up in the 50s or the 60s, it's a much different place than it is today. The demographics around that center just cannot support a 1.5 million square foot regional shopping center like it did 60 years ago, right? In terms of a better mousetrap, just look up the road in Pontiac, Summit Place, right? And that has been, that actually is a reflection of both changing demographics around that shopping center. But the better, in this case, you had two better mousetraps. You had Great Lakes Crossing, which Taubman built in '99 up in Auburn Hills, but also Somerset Collection over just around the corner from here in Troy. And of course, you had first the south side and then the north side. So this thing just happens. The world isn't static. So those are, tends to be the major reasons, right? But over the history as well, you've had a significant amount of department store consolidation and closure, right? And this is not a recent thing. Obviously you get a lot of press today, whether it's Sears or, Macy's just announced that they're going to close 150 stores over the next 3 years. Penny's just announced they're going to close 25 stores, a handful of stores, like 6 or 7 as well. But just think about going back to what I said about Eastland, right? That was developed by Hudson Department Store. When's the last time we saw a Hudson's nameplate here in Metro Detroit? And Hudson's became Marshall Field's, and Marshall Field's became Macy's. And then there's names like Montgomery Ward and Lazarus if you're from Columbus, Gottschalk's and Bullock's and Burdines and Rich's, all these names that have gone away from the retail lexicon. And as you've had these consolidations and closures, obviously, Macy's wakes up one day and says, I don't need 2 or 3 stores in one single shopping center. And sometimes as these department stores close within a mall, that kind of creates a little bit of a domino effect or a T-tide that effectively causes the mall to deteriorate to a stage where it's no longer really active in your community. A little bit more recent, though, that's really impacting the shopping centers industry is what we call the barbell effect, right? Or the hollowing out of the middle. And this is not a political statement at all, but if you just kind of look at the data, this is a little bit reflective if you look up the incomes in the United States. And so as much as press that you get about the downfall of Sears or the downfall of Kmart or the downfall of JCPenney, if you look at the upper end at Hermes or Louis Vuitton or Gucci, they are doing as well as they have ever done. Bernard Arnault is now the richest man in France, and it's not by accident. And then if you look at the bottom of the scale in terms of the price point spectrum, TJ Maxx, Burlington Companies, Dollar General are all doing fantastically well. If you look at on any metric, whether it's comp store sales or total shareholder return or new store openings, they are thriving, right? And this middle has really impacted what we call in the industry B and C malls, right? So generally malls get tranched out into Class A malls, which is the Somerset Collection, 12 Oaks Mall and Novi. The B malls were those in the middle, and the C or D malls are the ones that are essentially falling away that will end up like Mall Monroe or Eastland in a couple of years. And the reason why the B and C malls have been impacted the most is, 20 years ago before .com, the J. Crews and the Gaps and so forth needed that extra point of distribution to cover and saturate an entire market. But now with .com, everyone has it on their phone, and if they want to experience the brick and mortar experience, which I'll spend a lot of time on in a second, you can go to the Somerset Collection, right? So they're rationalizing their store footprints into the very, very best malls, like Somerset and 12 Oaks. And there's not a new generation of tenants necessarily behind them. And so this is where they've kind of get stuck in this cycle. So going forward, I think everyone in the mall industry, even bulls like me, and obviously I have a self-interest in this, thinks that the number of malls will continue to rationalize. But that's no different than what has been, right? I mean, it's just the data. What may change, though, is certainly the velocity of change. But again, the velocity of change is not specific just to the mall industry. No matter what businesses that anyone is here, you probably have seen that over the last 10 years. Just the velocity of change has just rapidly increased throughout the economy. So, why do I say that, I think that the, strong malls will survive and thrive is that, brick and mortar retailers still need, retailers still need brick and mortar presence, right? And we've seen this big flight to quality. And here I just kind of picked out 4 or 5 examples that are local, and in this market, we tend to, and I think, again, we own 2 centers here, 12 Oaks and Great Lakes Crossing, but I think if you just talk to general industry experts, they'll generally identify Somerset, 12 Oaks, and Great Lakes as the 3 Class A assets in the market. And I specifically picked out these 5 or 6 headlines because I think they illustrate where the world is going in terms of the mall business, right? The first one is Hermes. Like I said, in terms of that price point structure, the Somerset Collection just announced, that they're bringing Hermes to the south side, the Somerset South. And again, luxury is thriving, and they're a point of distinction. You can't find an Hermes on every street corner. They're not like Kroger or Meijer or one of those, right? So it makes it special. So if you're an Hermes customer, you want to, your only choice in this market will be able to go to Somerset. Crate and Barrel. So even when there's movement within a mall, so they were obviously at Somerset, they're not, they're choosing to stay within the market. They're not choosing to exit, and they're just choosing another A mall, 12 Oaks and Novi. Peppa Pig opened up at Great Lakes Crossing over the last couple of years, and that's a big thing you probably have seen in the media of diversifying the merchandise mix and the store mix to include more entertainment. This is a kids' play area that's themed with the Peppa Pig British character, and again, this is the only one in the market. It was actually, I believe, the second one in the United States. So where they're choosing to open up is Class A assets. And again, it's more reflective of who the Great Lakes Crossing shopper is than maybe the Somerset Collection shopper is. Warby Parker also opened up at the Somerset Collection, and they're one of those brands that we call the emerging brands or DTC brands, direct-to-consumer brands, or digitally native brands. There's been a lot written about them. But again, when they're coming into markets, they're choosing the Class A operations. And these are really the kind of the next generation of retailers that you're going to see more and more in shopping centers. And lastly, so the Tap House, the second one that they decided to open in the market, was at 12 Oaks. And again, all the mall operators are focusing on diversifying the merchandising mix. So Peppa Pig in terms of entertainment, so the Tap House in terms of higher or elevated quality of food versus your old school food courts of the Sbarros and the Panda Express and so forth. So why do retailers still want brick and mortar when everyone can literally shop on their phones, take out their phones out of their pockets and buy whatever they want? And there's really 3 reasons, right? One is they want to express their brand. There's nothing that can express their brand more than in the 3 dimension, right? And sometimes there's 4 and 5 dimensions once you add smell and sound to it. And I know RH may be a little bit controversial example in this room and in this community, but they are really one of those retailers who've been really focused on brick and mortar, going from, if you go to the Somerset Collection unit, that's probably 10 to 12,000 square feet, versus this is a unit that they just opened up in Nashville with us at the Mall of Green Hills, and if you guys probably saw the old plans here in downtown Birmingham, and this is a furniture retailer who's probably 50% of their business happens online. It's because people want to, experience the RH brand in its totality. And on the left, they have a fantastic cafe that's one of the hottest tickets in town, or reservations in town. Secondly, it helps their .com business. It increases brand awareness. It helps with reverse logistics in terms of returns and those sorts of things. People can go in and try it out, whether it's a mattress like Casper or it's a dress if you're J. Crew. So this is one of the big things that's led a lot of the DTC brands to open up stores in shopping centers, and they create this big halo effect, is what they call. And Casper obviously just went public last week, and and one of the reasons is because they want to blow out their store footprint. And then thirdly is to maximize sales. Generally, if you have a .com presence and a brick and mortar presence in the same market, you're going to do more in sales, right? Your most loyal customers tend to touch you in all different ways, whether it's on .com, whether it's in the catalog, whether it's in the stores. And this is just one example from Neiman Marcus. So the emerging brands, like I said, is they are very focused on opening up their brick and mortar stores, and I love these pictures just because when people say that young kids in particular don't shop at malls or don't want to shop at stores, this is a great countervailing example. And if you saw their opening in Troy at Somerset, it was the same thing. I just don't have the pictures since. But I'm sure Nathan Forbes could get them for you. And this is at the Mall of Green Hills in Nashville. This is within the last, I'd say, 6 months that this occurred. It's literally straight out of the 1980s when Tiffany would go around and sing in the common areas, right? And this is a store called Morphe, which if you have, I guess, mostly young daughters, is very, very popular beauty and skincare brand. And you can see how popular the response was. And our big thing is, retail isn't dead, brick and mortar isn't dead. Bad brick and mortar or stale brick and mortar or really, really undifferentiated brick and mortar is what's really dead. If you do something exciting, you are going to be able to get that turnout just like Morphe. So where are we going, since this is a forecast? There have been a lot of malls that closed, as I mentioned earlier, and this is a map on the left of Metro Detroit. And look at all those red dots. Those are kind of the 15 that I had mentioned, or plus the 2 with Monroe and Eastland, so it's the 17. And don't worry about reading the very small print to the right, I apologize. But basically, what to focus on is that orange line in that table. Everything above it is, say, pre-Great Recession. These are the malls that closed. And when they closed, they essentially got replaced by some other new type of retail, right? Typically big box, Walmarts, Costco's, that sort of thing. Tele12 here at 12 Mile in Telegraph. Everything below the line, post-recession, what you'll see is all the plans, and for those that have been effectuated, it's either some sort of hybrid retail center and generally non-retail use, right? Particularly mixed use, right? Office, multifamily, sometimes medical, and so forth. Right? And the reason is the U.S. generally doesn't need much more retail. So what had covered up all those malls closing up before is new malls coming online. So you didn't see this stark different, right? You had new supply offsetting stuff that was closing. But we've essentially reached a saturation point, right? We've reached that point in the life cycle of retail development where we don't really need that much more new retail, particularly since we have endless supply of retail on our phones and on our laptops. So where are we going? And these are going to be the 2 non-local examples, but I think are very illustrative of what could happen here in Metro Detroit for any shopping centers that A, may close or may have redevelopment opportunities like a closed department store. This is in Dallas, and is on the site of a former mall called Valley View Mall. It's 1.6 million square feet for traditional department stores, Dillard's, JCPenney, Sears, and the like. And it's fantastic real estate. If you guys know anything about Dallas, it's right on the Dallas North Tollway and the LBJ, right? And so what they're going to do, and they're starting construction this year, is scrap and demo. They've already started the demolition process clean the site, and spend $4 billion on all of this on the left. And it's, there is some retail and entertainment involved. But, there's hotels, there's office, there's residential, lots of green space. They got hiking trails, they got biking trails, and so forth. To really, provide a 360 experience, or, 360, and also live, work, play, and all the urbanist trends that you might hear about. And lastly, then I'll quickly get off the stage, is Phipps Plaza here down in Atlanta. This is owned by Simon Property Group, and they're taking a traditional department store called Belk, street levels, 160,000 square feet, demoing it, and then adding a Nobu hotel, a Nobu restaurant, a Mega Lifetime Fitness or a Lifetime Athletic, and a 13-story Class A office building attached right in the heart of Buckhead, for those of you guys who are familiar with Atlanta. And interestingly, and I love this as an example, right? Because this is, Phipps Plaza is, by anyone's definition, a Class A mall. It's anchored by Saks. And Nordstrom is in one of the, if not the best neighborhood in Atlanta. But they're taking a department store that had only been open for about probably 10 years or so, and that had replaced another closed department store. So in yesteryear, when the Parisian closed, you'd just replace it with a Belk. But now, kind of going forward, I think you're going to see much, much more of this in terms of redeveloping boxes to bring different types of experiences and different types of uses into big, large regional mall spaces. So hopefully I'm within my time limit. All right, thank you so much. I'm sure I'll be back. Do you want me to sit up here, or I can sit up here?
All right, thank you, Scotty, for that. The next person, our second speaker this morning, is John North. Mr. North is the CEO of Coldwell Banker Weir Emanuel and their family of companies. He has 20 years experience in the real estate industry, all with Coldwell Banker, beginning as a sales associate in 1999 and working his way up to CEO. He serves various charitable organizations through CBWM, CARES Foundation. Mr. North lives in Birmingham with his wife of 25 years and their 2 daughters. At this time, I'd like to welcome Mr. John North to the podium.
Zip on by here. Good morning, everyone. It must be really cold out. Good morning, everybody. Let's see here. I don't know if I want to go off that side. It looks beautiful to me. I think we should all. I get a little concerned when I hear talk of malls. I've got 2 teenage daughters, so that's a scary picture. So I'll try and keep it brief this morning, and if you know me at all, you'll know that I rarely speak off of a written page, so we'll kind of do it off the cuff here this morning. I think it's all pretty straightforward. I did put some slides together, and we're using the median house values, and we put up there Birmingham, Bloomfield Township, Bloomfield Hills, Oakland County, and all of RealComp. For those of you not familiar with RealComp, that's the local MLS system that covers the entire area around here. You see the numbers look good. 2018 versus 2019, up, everything's looking good. Little variation as you start to spread out across the county. That's very normal. We didn't really, if we look back on our predictions for last year, at least the company, I think we were right on line there. And the median home values, home sales across the board, you'll see a number is going to jump out to you, especially since we're sitting right here in beautiful downtown Birmingham. And you'll see the overall sales went down 8.6%. It seems really concerning. I would be careful when we're looking at numbers like this. That represents a much larger amount of sales in comparison to Bloomfield Township, well, certainly Bloomfield Hills. And I wouldn't be too concerned about that number, and we're certainly not. And you can see right at the very bottom there, and I think this is an important one for all of us to pay attention to, across the USA, up 3.6% year over year. Average days on market, again, you'll see Birmingham popped up a little bit, but remember, it's 3 days. So the 7.5% Bloomfield Township was flat, and Bloomfield Hills went down by a whopping 24%. And actually, again, you've got to take that in correlation with the total amount of sales in Bloomfield Hills. And if we went back to the year prior to this, Bloomfield Hills actually did a little bit of an adjustment and came back up this last year. And that's why you see those days on market going down a little bit. And they're more in line with the rest of the area. Across the board, everything looks good. Percentage of owners versus renters, people ask us all the time. That number stays largely the same, can fluctuate from time to time. We haven't seen that over the past couple of years. It's remained relatively steady. And you'll see home ownership across the U.S. hovering at around 64%. I put this slide in here all the time because I think it's an important measurement. Home ownership is not just about owning a home, but it's also about wealth and the growth of wealth for families. And you'll see if you're a renter, obviously you're not accumulating any wealth or growth in it. And you'll notice that homeowners, first starting in 2000, then we jumped to 2016, and then to 2018, we see a steady growth in wealth for all homeowners across the board, which is a great thing for all of us. So what's going on? What's happened? What's causing all this to happen? Well, if we look at the Metro Detroit area, going all the way back to where we were actually at a -5% when things were really tough. And now look where we're at today. The top red line is, of course, the United States, and the Detroit's below. But you can see we're on a steady path of growth, and that's a wonderful thing. And that ties into the housing market just as it does into commercial. GDP growth, 2.9% in 2018. They're predicting it's going to slow down a little bit, but certainly no indication of a recession. If you remember back, if we went back to last year, I think if we all pulled out the newspapers or our phones, since we seem to use those a lot more, and went back and looked at the data from last year, the news reports, everybody was predicting the end was near. We were going to go into a recession, button up, tighten up, things are going to get rough, and of course it didn't happen. And I think part of that was we all assumed that one of the things that was going to happen were mortgage rates were going to go high and business was going to pull back even further and things were going to really get out of whack. But if you'll notice, it hasn't been the case. It's a little off from 18. Let's fast forward here. So what happened? If you look in the middle, and I don't know if this has a pointer on it, but if you went back to the center part, where the green arrow starts to go up, at the very bottom there, you see a jump up, right? The market was coming down. We were really struggling. And then we had this real jump in it. And that's, if you remember back when the federal government put in the buyer tax credit and tried to stimulate the housing market, and it actually worked. And that's why you see those jumps. And then it came back down, and then it's been on a steady path going up. And that represents the policy changes and growth in the U.S. and jobs across the board. And you'll see it was on a steady path going all the way up, and then you see it drops off again. And then it goes right back up. And that drop-off had to do when interest rates got up above 5%. I think if there was one thing we should all be asking a question about is, are we now have a whole generation of folks that are anticipating interest rates that have to be around 4% or they're not going to buy a home. Now, I'm not sure that's an accurate statement. My point is that many of us in the room would remember a different interest rate when we first bought our own home. So still today enjoying a fabulous interest rate and a great climate. After-tax corporate profits are up and through the roof. That's fantastic. But here's what they've been reinvesting into their business. And that, if you go all the way to the last quarter or Q3 of 2019, you'll see it's been dropping off steadily. And most of the experts believe that had to do with a lot of the trade talk that went on last year. And we didn't have trade agreements with major partners like Canada and Mexico and China. And because we didn't have those, business got a little stalled out. And they said, wait a minute, we want to see what's going to happen with the future, and we'll decide what we're going to do going forward. Consumer confidence is high, continues to grow right on through 2019. Looks like it's going to continue into the future. So what about home ownership? Everything is going through the roof. Stocks, businesses, profits, everything looks rosy, it's all good. But you see the home ownership rate has been a little bit slower to recover, right? It's not skyrocketing in correlation to any of those. So why is that? Why do we think that's happened? Well, the easy answer to it is housing starts. In this nation, we are well below what we've historically built. We started that path during the downturn, and we've been unable to recover from it in any kind of meaningful way. Now, we did see some really good numbers last year, and I anticipate that they're going to get better this year. But those housing starts are a big part of it. And while it's increasing, if you go all the way back to the peak of it there in 2005, you can see we're way behind in our housing starts. So we need more homes being built, more skilled labor. We need a lot of stuff to help that get there, and I know they're working on it. This is an interesting slide I wanted to put up there. This is I get this question a lot, especially because we're now in the presidential election year. And all of us usually assume, and maybe it's our own personal prejudices, or maybe we just assume it's this way because it gets, we start focusing on it. But the reality of it is in a presidential election year, many economic things actually go up. We think they're going to go down or stall out, and they typically don't. And you'll see here, you'll see the job growth in the green there increases. You'll see that business spending typically increases. And you'll see the third category over there, and it's hard for me to see it from here. So why is this important? Well, we're in a historic election. They all seem to be historic for me. The older you get, they all become important. This is yet another year where we're going to have an election. And I think if you look at all the economic indicators surrounding us today, I think it's going to be just fine for the economy as we roll through this election year and see what the result of it is one way or another. So what are we forecasting? Well, I took this one from NAR, from the National Association of Realtors. New home sales growth at about 11%. Existing home sales are going to grow by 4%. Median sale price growth of 3.6% across the board. And the interest rate to stay hovering around 3.8 by the end of the year. If you were to go online and check today, and whether you went to, there's a myriad of places where you could go and get predictions from, I would say that NAR's predictions are about middle of the road. They're not, they're relatively conservative, but not to the point of where I think they're underestimating what's going to happen. It appears to me, and we're forecasting at our company similar numbers. I think it's the other comment I'd make about interest rates is, and I know we probably have a number of folks here in the banking industry or mortgage industry. Every time the Fed Reserve gets together and has their little meeting, it's going to raise the rate. There's a lot of talk around our offices about what's happening with the 30-year fixed rate or what's going to happen with the mortgage rate. It's really not tied to that as much as it is the 10-year Treasury. So we think and believe it's going to stay in that range, if not below it, as we roll forward through the rest of the year, which is a really great thing for all of us. So, Joe, I hope I went fast enough, good enough?
Thank you.
We all good?
All right, thank you again to both of you. Now we get to the fun part, the Q&A. Let's do the first question for Scotty. We keep hearing brick and mortar retail is dead. You covered this already, but this will be a little bit deeper dive, I think. As the owners of malls throughout the country, how is Taubman itself going to combat that perception, and what are you guys doing in the future?
Sure. I think it depends on the market and the type of shopping center that you have. And just to use local examples, since you guys are probably more familiar with them. And again, we don't own Somerset. That's obviously Forbes is the managing partner there. But if you look at how they're structuring their merchandising mix and adding Hermes, for example, on the south side, but even on the north side with the Warby Parkers, the Pelotons, the Untuckits, the Lovesacks, those are all those what we call the digitally native brands or so forth. Is to kind of next gen. because the predominant reason why people want to go there is to shop, right, and to socialize and so forth. And you can even see how they've upgraded their merchandising mix, say, in the food court, right, with Shake Shack and Chick-fil-A, right? Despite the fact that Chick-fil-A has probably been open for 18 months, that line is seemingly never short, right? And I think that's going to, over time, and most of the things, this is both a good and a bad thing, I think, about the mall. So, for the lenders here, you guys love our 7 to 10 year leases because there's granular income streams and you're locked in for 7 to 10 years and you usually get credit tenants and it's just, you're collecting coupons or clipping coupons throughout that time. On the other hand, the downside is it is hard for landlords to shift on a dime, right? So you sometimes just need to have these natural expirations come up and then you can start to fill in with new ideas and new hot retailers or dining concepts, etc. Now, if you shift over to, say, like Great Lakes Crossing, which has, I would say, a more middle income shopper demographic, but just as successful within its own, I would say, sandbox, you see a lot more entertainment. So when Sports Authority filed for bankruptcy and closed, we replaced it with Round One, which is a kind of all-in gaming sort of concept with arcade games, bowling, ping pong, etc. Talked about Peppa Pig being added, and they replaced Charmin Charlie's, which is essentially a women's ready-to-wear and accessory. So where you're seeing there is, to remain relevant, is a little bit less on the soft goods side. So we're not adding Hermes, we're not adding brands like Warby Parker or something, but we're adding more entertainment, we're adding more dining, and so forth, right? And then in the third cases could be something like Phipps Plaza, you're adding Lifetime Fitness, you're adding a Pinstripes, you're adding office to increase the daily traffic to the shopping center, as well as a hotel, right? And so that makes it kind of that 24-hour experience in that shopping center. So I think there's no one playbook. It just really depends on the asset that you have in the market around it, as well as the competitive dynamics.
Thank you. John, everyone seems to agree that there is a shortage of affordable housing in Birmingham and Bloomfield. Is it possible to have affordable housing alternatives here given the cost of the land in these areas?
Well, that's a great question. I think first we have to define what affordable housing is, and I guess if you use the government's measurement, it's for an average home or household to be spending 30% or less on their housing costs per month or annually. And I do think there's things that Birmingham or Bloomfield Hills could do to increase affordable housing if they chose to make that something that they felt was needed in the community, whether it's through maybe creating some tax breaks or incentives for developers to work that land that is a little bit more costly than maybe other places. They could, of course, relax the zoning and development rules, which would have a great impact on their ability to be able to build those facilities and provide that. So I think, as a community, I think that's a decision they've got to make, or we've got to make together, and I think they're focused on it. In fact, I'm confident they are. How we go about getting there is always a challenge, and it's become a very complex thing for developers, and that time from when they purchase the property to actually putting a shovel in the ground costs a lot of money in regulations and other zoning requirements. So to the extent Birmingham or Bloomfield Hills or the township could lead the way in maybe relaxing those, maybe that spreads not only in our community but to other municipalities, so that would have a big impact. So, yeah.
Thank you. I guess let's kind of jump on that one then. Do you believe that residential and commercial property values are in a bubble? If yes, will values hold up better during the next downturn?
Well, I'm not a big believer that we're in a bubble of any sort as it relates to real estate, both residential or commercial. And I believe, due to a lot of the changes that were made during the last downturn, and I think most experts believe that, if and when we do have a recession, probably be short-lived. And certainly there's no indication that housing will play any role in leading us into it like it did in the past one.
Thank you. Scotty, sorry, I lost it. What percentage of mall revenue is reliant or on dining and other entertainment versus soft goods? And do you see that mix changing?
So I think it depends on the asset. So a center like 12 Oaks, which is a more traditional regional mall, we've typically allocated, let's call it 10 to 15% of square footage to dining and entertainment. They typically pay, just because of the margin structure, a little less, say, on a pro rata basis than soft goods. Apparel has much higher margins than dining. But if you think of something like Great Lakes Crossing, I bet you their allocation to food and entertainment is probably 35 to 40%. And again, on a pro rata basis, just because of margin structures, they tend to pay a little bit less than soft goods. I do believe that you're going to push up, particularly on the regional malls, the traditional regional malls, a little bit on dining and entertainment to diversify the mix. And it's also just, you know, as I always says, you can't eat online, right? You can get food delivered to you online, but you can't eat online. And, you know, just, you know, as human beings, we're social and we want to go places to be together and so forth. Even if it's to sit at a table and stare at our phones together, we're at least together. So yeah, I do believe it will creep up, but I don't know if it'll creep up, you know, significantly. Absent, you know, if you have a department store who closes and you tear it down, you add like a Field House USA or a Pinstripes or something. That, you know, those are the big ones. But if you have a center like Somerset where, you know, it will creep up maybe marginally, but it just kind of depends on the situation.
Thank you. John, kind of going back to what you were just talking about, and with the bubble and all that fun stuff. This kind of ties into a couple questions I saw. I'm going to kind of add a little bit, but looking at your charts, I saw the growth trajectories in Detroit or the regions, Michigan's below the U.S., but on the same kind of path.
It is.
And that was consistent even in other ones. Do you think that does that give us hope or pause? Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
The fact that we're
below, but we're on that same path.
Well, look, I think we should all be hopeful. I'm very bullish on Michigan. I probably have been, so maybe I'm a bit of a homer that way. But no, I think all the signs are very good for Southeast Michigan. I think a healthy major city in Detroit is essential to all of us, and I think they've made remarkable strides moving forward from where they were even 10 years ago. And I think job creation, look, it's a simple growth chart, right? Let's create jobs and create an environment where people can have good homes and communities to live in, and I think Southeast Michigan has plenty of that. And so, no, I wouldn't be concerned about it. The fact that we're hovering a little bit below the rest of the nation, I think Detroit was extremely hard hit during the last downturn, and I don't think anybody'd argue that. So our road back up should take us a little bit longer.
Agreed, plus we have a little bit more cushion to weather the storm.
That's right.
Final question here. Scotty, the Dallas Mall, I forget the name of it.
Valley View.
Thank you. Is that new ownership that's doing that project? Or
It
is that
is.
okay?
Yeah, so it used to be, I mean, they had a long history of owners, and then Beck Ventures, which is a local, I believe it's a local group, and they have now, since it's a $4 billion plan, as you might imagine, they have a series of partners as well. But it is new ownership coming in. But it's not always the case. So just to use another example, in Los Angeles, there's an old mall called Westside Pavilion that's shut down. It used to be anchored by Macy's and Nordstrom, and the owner of that was Macy's, and partnered with an office developer because they subsequently retrofitted and sold the building or leased the building in its entirety to Google. Right, and so sometimes even if you may bring in an office expert because our bread and butter is malls, right? And so and it's the same thing with Macerich. So a lot of times the mall owners will stay in it, right? If you have, in that case in particular, which was a very I think profitable transformation and a very very successful one.
Thank you.
Well, please join me in thanking our panelists this morning and our moderator. Great job, guys. Before we send you back into the cold, I just want to make a couple of thank yous. First to Bloomfield Community Television that's taping this, and you'll be able to watch it as many times as you want on an endless loop on public access TV. Also to our photographer, Doug Ashley, who always captures our events so beautifully. Thank you, Doug. And in closing, if you're a first-time visitor to a chamber event and you like what you saw, if you have people in your spheres of influence who you think might benefit from attending programs and events like these, please have them get in touch with us and we can talk to them about the benefits of membership. Again, on behalf of the staff, our board of directors, and our volunteers, I want to thank everybody for coming this morning, and hopefully we'll see you next month. Thank you.